The battle began in the cold, silent stretch of space where stars looked like distant sparks against the endless black. Captain Jackson Hawley stood on the bridge of the human warship Horizon Spear, his hands gripping the railing as alarms blared and red lights flashed across the room. Outside the reinforced viewports, the Karzoon Armada was advancing with terrifying speed. Their ships were enormous, dark, and jagged, glowing with eerie blue energy that pulsed like the heartbeat of a machine designed only for destruction. Humanity's fleet, though brave and well-trained, was outnumbered. Every human ship seemed fragile compared to the alien war vessels, and Jackson felt the weight of responsibility pressing down on him. If they failed here, entire colonies could be wiped out, and Earth itself might soon be under threat. The first warning shots came like lightning. Explosions lit the void as the Karzoon opened fire, plasma beams tearing through the shields of human ships. One of the nearby frigates erupted in flames, its hull twisting and crumpling before disintegrating into a cloud of debris. Jackson's stomach tightened at the sight, but he forced himself to focus. "Shields down to 20%. A crew member shouted from the console. "Impact on the port side." The ship shuddered violently, throwing Jackson against the railing. Sparks flew from broken control panels, and the acrid smell of burning circuitry filled the air. Through the chaos, Jackson's mind worked like a machine. He barked orders, redirecting energy to critical systems and coordinating maneuvers with the smaller human vessels. They couldn't outrun the Karzoon, nor could they hope to destroy the enemy outright in open space. The only chance they had was to hold a line long enough for civilians and transport ships to escape to the outer colonies. He felt the tension in the bridge crew, the fear behind their focused eyes, and he knew one mistake could cost them everything. Then the boarding pods arrived. Small dark shapes streaked toward the Horizon Spear, and Jackson realized the Karzoon intended to fight not only in space but inside their ship as well. He gritted his teeth. Humanity had fought against overwhelming odds before, and they had survived. They would survive this too, if only they held together and trusted each other. He activated the defense turrets and motioned for the Marines to prepare for boarding. Every second was precious. Every decision mattered. As the first pod slammed into the hull, the ship groaned under the impact. Jackson leapt to the nearest rail, steadying himself as the hull trembled. The alarm screamed louder, echoing in his ears, and the viewports filled with streaks of fire as the Marines engaged the alien attackers. In the chaos, a thought struck him. This battle was not just about winning or losing. It was about proving that humanity would not bow to fear, that even in the face of impossible odds, they could stand their ground. His chest tightened as he gripped his weapon, and he felt a surge of resolve. Somewhere deep in the blackness, other human ships were falling, exploding into clouds of metal and flame. But Jackson ignored the panic and fear. He focused only on the task at hand. Every maneuver, every command, every heartbeat counted. He saw the determination in his crew's eyes, the courage that refused to break even as the enemy pressed closer. Humanity was small, fragile, and outnumbered, but it was not weak. They fought with intelligence, with courage, and with a stubborn refusal to surrender. Jackson knew that as long as they held, as long as they fought together, there was a chance. The battle raged around them, a storm of fire and metal. In the midst of explosions and chaos, Jackson felt a strange calm settle over him. This was the crucible of war, the test that would determine whether humanity survived. And he would see it through. Whatever it took, whatever cost, the Horizon Spear would not fall, and humanity would fight back. The stars themselves seemed to tremble with the violence of the battle, but Jackson Hawley, captain of a human ship, refused to give in. In that moment, as the enemy closed in and the alarm screamed louder, he knew that the fight was far from over, but humanity's spirit would not be broken. After the battle, the Horizon Spear drifted through space, battered and scorched, its hull scarred from plasma fire and collisions with debris. The bridge crew worked tirelessly to patch critical systems, reroute power to shields, and repair communication arrays. The air smelled of burnt circuits and recycled oxygen, but the human crew refused to give in. Captain Jackson Hawley moved through the corridors with steady steps, checking on each station, offering calm words to those whose hands shook from adrenaline. The Karzoon assault had been fierce, but humanity had survived. Still, the victory was fragile, and Jackson knew their fight was far from over. A few hours after the chaos, he led a small team of Marines and engineers toward a captured Karzoon barge that had been disabled during the fight. The ship floated silently, its engines dead, and eerie blue lights flickered along its hull. Smoke rose from vents, and the silence inside felt heavier than the battle had outside. Every step echoed as they moved through the corridors, weapons raised, scanning for life signs. Jackson's mind was alert. The Karzoon were ruthless and unpredictable. They could be hiding anything: traps, weapons, or survivors. His training kept him calm, but a small, nagging fear lingered deep in the barge. In a sealed chamber near the engineering section, they discovered a small pod. Its surface was scorched and scratched as if someone had fought to escape, but it remained intact. Jackson carefully opened the hatch, and inside sat a young alien woman. Her skin was pale and almost silver in the dim light, and her long green hair fell around her shoulders. She looked fragile, yet her wide, frightened eyes held a glimmer of intelligence and defiance. Her arms were bound by restraints that glowed faintly with alien technology, and she flinched at the humans as though expecting them to strike. Jackson lowered his weapon and crouched to her level. "It's okay," he said softly, his voice steady. "You're safe now." The alien's eyes flickered with confusion and fear. Then, in a soft, trembling voice, she whispered a name: Soria. It was the first human word she had spoken to anyone, and it carried a weight of trust and vulnerability. The medic approached carefully, scanning her with a portable device. "She's not Karzoon," the medic said. "She belongs to another species. Looks like she was enslaved." Jackson's jaw tightened. He looked at Soria and saw the same pain he had seen in civilians back on the outer colonies: loss, fear, and the knowledge that her life had been stolen from her. He straightened, meeting the eyes of his team. "She's under my protection," he said firmly. "No one will harm her while she is with us." The other soldiers nodded, some with relief, some with quiet uncertainty. Jackson stepped closer to Soria and extended a hand, not to claim her, but to offer safety and solidarity. Slowly, she reached out, trembling but trusting him enough to take it as they escorted her back to the Horizon Spear. Soria remained silent, her eyes scanning the stars outside the viewport. She did not understand human language fully, but she could sense the emotions, determination, care, and a sense of duty that radiated from Jackson. She had been treated as property, as an object, for much of her life, but here she felt something entirely new: respect and protection. That moment marked a turning point, not just for Soria, but for Jackson as well. She was no longer a prize of war or a helpless survivor. She was a person, and humanity's responsibility had just become larger. On the bridge, Soria's eyes followed the distant stars. She did not yet know the full scope of the war or the battles that still awaited her new protectors. But as she looked at Jackson, she felt the first sparks of hope. For the first time in her life, someone had not taken something from her. Someone was offering her a chance to survive and to fight back. And in that small, fragile moment, the first threads of trust formed between the human captain and the alien survivor, threads that would later weave a bond strong enough to face the storm of war that awaited them. After Soria's rescue, The human fleet regrouped at Bastion Station, a massive orbital stronghold hovering above a battered planet on the edge of human-controlled space. The station was alive with activity. Engineers rushed along narrow corridors, repairing ships that had survived the Karzoon onslaught, while soldiers and pilots prepared for the inevitable next wave of attacks. Jackson Hawley moved among them, his presence calm yet commanding, offering guidance and encouragement wherever it was needed. The human forces had been pushed to their limits, and the crew of the Horizon Spear carried the weight of exhaustion, but they refused to surrender. Humanity was small, scattered across distant star systems, yet they had a stubborn strength that could not be measured in numbers alone. Soriy quickly adapted to her new surroundings. Though exhausted and weary, she began sharing what she knew about the Karzoon. She spoke of their tactics, their weaknesses, and the way they communicated across fleets, sometimes even predicting their movements. Humans who had once felt helpless in the face of the alien threat now looked at her with renewed hope. Engineers hunched over consoles, translating her knowledge into strategic advantages, while pilots memorized flight patterns she described, learning how to outmaneuver Karzoon ships in ways no human had thought possible. Soria's presence was not only a gift of information but a spark of morale, a sign that even in the darkest times the tide could turn. Yet the shadow of fear remained. Soria's stories spoke of worlds destroyed, of families torn apart, and of civilizations reduced to nothing by the relentless Karzoon. She carried memories too heavy for anyone to bear, and sometimes she would sit quietly in a corner of the station, staring at the stars beyond the windows, trembling at what she had survived. Jackson noticed this, understanding that saving her body was only the first step. Helping her regain her spirit would be a longer journey. He often found her there, and he would simply stand beside her, saying nothing, offering the presence of someone who cared. Slowly, she began to respond not with words, but with small gestures of trust, letting herself be guided and protected. The respite at Bastion Station was short-lived. Scouts reported the approach of a massive Karzoon supercarrier, a ship larger than anything humanity had ever faced. Its dark hull blocked out stars, and its weapons could destroy entire colonies in a single strike. Panic rippled through the station, but Jackson did not falter. He convened the leaders of the fleet and gathered Soriya with him in the command room. "We face impossible odds," he said, voice steady, "but we do not give up. Humanity survives because we refuse to surrender, because we fight even when the outcome seems hopeless. And with Soria's help, we finally have a chance to strike at their heart." Soriya nodded. Though still young and wary, she felt a determination rising within her, a fierce desire to fight back against those who had taken everything from her. "I will help," she said simply. Her voice carried a quiet strength that reminded Jackson of why he led, not for glory, but to protect those who could not protect themselves. Together, they devised a daring plan. A small strike team would board the supercarrier, sabotaging its reactor and key systems, then escape before the ship could react. The mission was dangerous, nearly suicidal, but it was the only way to shift the war's balance. Jackson volunteered to lead the strike personally, and Soriya insisted on joining. He tried to refuse, warning her of the extreme danger, but she shook her head firmly. "I cannot stand by while my people and yours suffer," she said. Her resolve mirrored Jackson's own, a shared determination that bound them not by duty alone, but by the knowledge that they were fighting for something greater than themselves. That night, as the fleet prepared for the mission, humanity's spirit burned brighter than ever. Outnumbered and facing a terrifying enemy, they would strike back not with despair, but with courage, ingenuity, and the unshakable belief that even the smallest force could change the course of war. The day of the mission arrived, and the human strike team prepared in the hangar of Bastion Station. Captain Jackson Hawley checked every system of the boarding craft, ensuring weapons were loaded, engines ready, and shields functional. Soria moved beside him, her expression calm but her hands betraying a slight tremble. She had spent days studying the supercarrier's schematics and internal systems, learning its layout, its defenses, and the patterns of its guards. Though her body was smaller and weaker than the soldiers, her mind was a weapon, and Jackson knew that without her guidance, this mission would almost certainly fail. The other Marines exchanged glances, some apprehensive, some quietly admiring the alien's courage. The hangar doors opened to the void of space, revealing the massive Karzoon supercarrier. Its dark hull stretched farther than any human eye could see, blotting out stars as it drifted toward the human fleet. Outside, smaller human ships swarmed around it, drawing the attention of its turrets while the strike team slipped into position. Soria input the false identification codes, and the boarding craft glided toward the carrier with practiced precision. For a tense moment, nothing happened. Then a faint green light scanned their ship, and Soria whispered, "They bought it for now." Relief washed over the team, but they did not relax. Any second, the illusion could break, and the carrier's defenses would respond with deadly force. They entered the carrier, through an exhaust port Soria had located, the walls of the corridor humming with energy. Inside, the ship was massive, a labyrinth of metallic corridors, glowing conduits, and the low hum of power that felt almost alive. The team moved quickly but cautiously, aware that every corner could hide Karzoon warriors. The alien soldiers were taller and stronger than humans, their armor hard and flexible, their plasma blades deadly. Yet Jackson and his team advanced with precision, trusting Soria's knowledge to guide them past patrols and traps. Every step was tense, every shadow a potential threat. Suddenly, alarms blared, red lights flashing through the corridor. Their false codes had expired, and the Karzoon realized the intrusion. Jackson barked orders, and the team split strategically, covering each other as they advanced. Gunfire erupted, lighting the hall with blue plasma bolts. Soria shouted directions in the Karzoon language, warning of patrols, opening doors, and guiding the team toward the reactor core. At one point, a towering Karzoon commander blocked their path, its glowing eyes fixed on them with deadly intent. Instinctively, Soria stepped forward, speaking in a sharp, commanding tone the alien understood. The commander hesitated, confused by the sudden defiance of one of its supposed captives. That pause was all Jackson needed. A single precise shot struck true, and the commander fell. Clearing their path, they reached the reactor chamber, a vast sphere of pulsing blue energy surrounded by humming conduits and control panels. Jackson and the team quickly set charges at critical points, while Soria input override commands to destabilize the reactor systems. The air was thick with tension, and every second seemed to stretch into an eternity. Explosions rocked other parts of the ship as human fighters engaged the Karzoon from outside. Just as the last charge was set, a massive structural beam collapsed, pinning Jackson beneath it. Pain shot through his leg, and he gritted his teeth against it. "Go!" he shouted, but Soria refused to leave him. With a strength born of desperation and determination, she pulled the beam just enough for him to crawl free. Together, they ran through the corridors as the ship shook violently. Fire, smoke, and debris followed them, the supercarrier beginning to implode from the destabilized reactor. They reached the hangar just in time, launching the boarding craft as the ship erupted behind them in a blinding explosion, a burst of light that could be seen across the void. Humanity had struck a devastating blow against the Karzoon, but the fight was not over. Jackson and Soria, bruised and exhausted, looked back at the burning wreck, knowing that their courage and teamwork had turned the tide of war, if only for a moment. The explosion of the Karzoon supercarrier lit up the darkness of space like a second sun. Jackson Hawley and Soria drifted in the boarding craft, their bodies bruised, their breaths heavy, and the metallic taste of smoke and adrenaline lingering in their mouths. Around them, the remnants of the carrier spun like broken stars, shards of metal and fire scattering into the void. The Horizon Spear and the remaining human ships were already moving in formation, their sensors scanning for debris and survivors, ready to provide cover as the strike team retreated. Jackson felt the weight of exhaustion pressing on him, but there was also a quiet surge of triumph. Against overwhelming odds, humanity had delivered a decisive blow. The hangar of Bastion Station erupted in activity as the strike team returned. Engineers rushed to repair minor damage on the craft, while medics checked for injuries. Soria remained quiet for a moment, staring at the images of the exploding carrier projected on the station's large viewports. Her green eyes reflected both awe and sorrow. She had seen worlds destroyed, ships filled with life obliterated, and yet here she stood, witnessing her first major victory against the Karzoon. It was a strange mix of relief and grief. She had fought to survive, and now she could see the power of resistance, the possibility of turning the tide. Jackson placed a steady hand on her shoulder, grounding her. "This is only the beginning," he said quietly. "We've won today, but the war isn't over." For the first time, Soria allowed herself a small smile. She realized that victory was not just about destruction. It was about survival, strategy, and trust. Humans, though smaller and physically weaker than the Karzoon, had something far greater: courage, determination, and the ability to think, adapt, and fight together. In that moment, she understood why Jackson had insisted on her being part of the mission. It was not just her knowledge that mattered, but her bravery, her willingness to act despite fear. She had stepped out of her past of captivity and into a future where she could contribute, where her actions could change outcomes, and where hope was possible. As the fleet recovered from the battle, reports came in from other human colonies. Messages of relief, of communities spared because the Karzoon had lost their supercarrier, reached the command centers. Every message reinforced what Jackson had always believed. Humanity's strength was in their unity, their courage, and their refusal to give up, even when the odds seemed impossible. The destruction of the carrier gave the humans a breathing space, a chance to regroup, plan, and strike back at the invaders. It also gave Soria time to begin healing, not just physically, but emotionally. As the trauma of her enslavement and the horror she had witnessed slowly began to ease, that evening, Jackson and Soria stood on the observation deck of the Horizon Spear, looking out into the vast blackness of space. Stars sparkled like distant fires, some near enough to be welcoming, some so far away they seemed unreachable. Silence surrounded them, broken only by the hum of the ship and the distant chatter of the fleet. Soria spoke softly, her voice almost a whisper. "I thought I had lost everything. I thought there was no hope." She paused, looking at Jackson. "But today, we proved I was wrong." He nodded, understanding the weight of her words. "Humanity fights even when hope is small," he said. "We survive because we refuse to give in, and we protect those who cannot protect themselves. That's how we win." In the days that followed, humanity's confidence grew. Soria began training with the crew, learning human tactics and teaching what she knew about the Karzoon. She and Jackson often sparred with ideas, strategies, and simulations, building trust and respect. The fleet moved forward, ready to reclaim territory and protect colonies. And the story of the strike team's success spread quickly, inspiring others to stand firm against the alien threat. Victory, though fragile and incomplete, was a promise, a proof that even in the darkest times, courage, ingenuity, and resilience could turn despair into hope. Humanity had not only survived, they had struck back, and the galaxy would remember that they would not be defeated. With the Karzoon supercarrier destroyed, humanity gained a much-needed advantage, but the war was far from over. Captain Jackson Hawley and the fleet pushed forward into contested space, reclaiming systems the aliens had once controlled. Each victory was hard-won, with every colony liberated carrying the scars of previous battles. Still, humans pressed on, not because they were the strongest or the most numerous, but because they refused to surrender. Hope and determination fueled them as much as engines and weapons, and for the first time, the galaxy began to see that humanity was not a species to be conquered easily. Soria became more than a survivor or guide. She became a symbol of what could be gained when courage and trust overcame fear. She worked with human strategists, showing them new ways to anticipate Karzoon attacks and teaching crews how to use alien technology against its creators. But more importantly, she learned from humans as well, discovering the strength in their persistence and unity. Often, she trained with the soldiers, learning to fight alongside them rather than merely advising them. Every maneuver, every battle, built her confidence, and every success reminded her that her past did not define her. She had a purpose now, and that purpose was intertwined with humanity's struggle for survival. The battles were relentless. The Karzoon, though wounded, fought back with ferocity, sending raiding fleets to disrupt supply lines and test human defenses. Jackson and Soria faced countless dangers together, navigating ambushes in asteroid fields, skirmishes near uninhabited planets, and boarding enemy craft to sabotage weapon systems. Each fight tested their skill, courage, and trust. Soria often risked her life to warn of hidden traps or to disable security measures that could have destroyed the human crews. Jackson, in turn, shielded and guided her, never letting her face danger alone. Their bond grew stronger with every mission. Forged in the crucible of battle, built on mutual respect, and tempered by shared hardship. After months of relentless campaigning, the humans cornered the Karzoon forces in a distant star system. Here, they faced the alien fleet one final time, and the battle was the largest yet. Human ships darted through asteroid belts, dodging heavy plasma fire, while boarding teams struck at critical enemy vessels. Soria played a pivotal role, guiding them through the enemy's defenses and predicting their maneuvers. Jackson led his squad with precision, striking where the enemy was weakest and rallying his forces when it seemed all hope was lost. For hours the battle raged, fire and metal filling the void. But humanity held fast at the climax of the conflict. Jackson and Soria boarded the Karzoon flagship to disable its command systems. The corridors were alive with alarms and the hum of alien technology. They moved with practiced efficiency, evading patrols and planting charges at key locations. As the final charge detonated, the flagship convulsed, systems failing, engines shutting down. The remaining Karzoon ships, cut off from their command, retreated into deep space. Humanity had won. The galaxy had witnessed the resilience, ingenuity, and unbreakable spirit of a species that refused to be crushed in the aftermath. Colonies rebuilt, and humans and Soria's people began to establish contact, sharing knowledge and forging alliances. Jackson and Soria stood on the deck of the Horizon Spear, looking out at a new star rising on the horizon of a liberated planet. The air was quiet, peaceful for the first time in months, and the stars seemed to shine with the promise of a future they had fought to secure. Soria turned to Jackson, a small smile on her face. "We did it," she said softly. "We really did it." Jackson nodded, eyes on the horizon. "No," he said, "we survived. And now, we make sure the galaxy knows what humanity is capable of." Together they had shown that strength was not measured in size or weapons, but in courage, loyalty, and the will to fight for what is right. Humanity had endured, and in doing so, had become a force that would not be forgotten. The battles were over, but the story of survival, resilience, and hope would echo across the stars for generations. Jackson and Surya stood side by side, survivors of war, witnesses to the power of unity, and living proof that even in the darkest times, light could prevail. The galaxy was vast and dangerous, but humanity would meet it head-on, unyielding and unbroken.